Why are people still moving to Vancouver? If you're paying attention to the media, especially on YouTube, it seems like there's a lengthy list of issues with living in Vancouver. The top of that list would be the cost of living, housing affordability, crime, homelessness, drug addiction, the weather, apparently that sucks too, and childcare. All of those things are major issues for people living in Vancouver, and yet Vancouver is one of the fastest growing cities in all of Canada, and it has been for decades. Why is that? Why do people love Vancouver so much, and why are they coming here? Not only that, who is coming here and where are they settling? Those are all details we're going to be getting into in this video. Let's get into it right now. My name is Sebastian Albrecht with the Living in Vancouver, BC team, and we're not going to waste any time here. We're going to get right into reason number one of why people are still moving to Vancouver, and that is a work-life balance. I think this might be one of the most important things that draws people here, and it's the thing that really keeps people in Vancouver. If they're going to be a long-term Vancouverite, this has to be a value to you. Sort of finding a balance between your work and your life. This is one of those cities that allows for that, and I think it's fairly common up and down the West Coast, whether it's LA or San Diego or Seattle or Vancouver. There's a lot of commonality in those cities in the way that people approach their lives. And so if you're purely pursuing a career and money, you're most likely not going to be drawn to Vancouver because it does cost a lot to live here and pay isn't quite as good as it could be elsewhere. People that are typically drawn primarily by their own careers are going to be drawn in Canada to Toronto and possibly to Calgary, depending on how the economy, oil and gas sector is doing at the time. But in recent years, it's definitely Calgary and Toronto. And then if you're more focused on a relaxing time and enjoying yourself, you're probably not going to want to be in a city, and you're probably more likely to be in a rural area. And specifically, like if you're coming to the Lower Mainland into this region, more people might be drawn to the Gulf Islands or to Vancouver Island. But if you kind of want that balance between work and play, you're most likely seeing Vancouver as that ideal setting that allows both of those sides of your life to really, really thrive. And number two would be the weather. Yeah, I did list it at the beginning of the video as one of the issues people seem to have with Vancouver. Generally, they view it as being dark and rainy, which I can't really argue with. But there are a lot of people that come here because of the weather. Now, you might be from a country that is very hot and humid, and the kind of temperature, the mild temperatures that we tend to have in Vancouver could be a real draw for you. Or if you're from other parts of Canada, you might just be tired of really cold winters. And so if you don't want the extremes, Vancouver is one of the ideal places in the world that's right in the middle. It's not too hot, it's not too cold. It's sort of got this Goldilocks weather that's generally ideal for a lot of people. Now, this winter in particular, I gotta say, it's, what is it now? The beginning of January, and we've rarely dipped to this point below 10 degrees. It's been crazy warm. It's actually confusing Mother Nature so much that you're starting to see some bulbs pop out here and there. Things that would normally start happening in a couple months, sort of in early March or mid-March or something like that, is starting to happen right now. Now, this is very, very unusual and not at all common. And in fact, it looks like we're gonna get some really cold weather for Vancouver next week, where it's dipping down to -5, -10 in that kind of range. And again, that's not all that normal. That's a bit of an extreme for our winters. We'll see if it actually happens. It's only my iPhone that's been predicting that so far. But for the most part, our winters are fairly mild. They hover around 0 degrees, dip down below a little bit. We get some snow, but not typically a lot. And then our summers tend to be pretty mild as well. And temperatures, yes, they could go up to about 30 degrees Celsius, but they rarely, go much higher than mid-20s, I would say. And for the most part, hover around 20 degrees with a lot of sun. And so if you sort of appreciate a milder climate, Vancouver might be the ideal setting for you. And it does draw a lot of people who are tired of the extremes that they're finding in other parts of the world. So weather can be a real draw for the right kind of people. I'll get you back to the video in just a second, but could you do me a favor? Let me know in the comments below where you're watching from right now. I am incredibly curious. Now let's get back to the video. And another big reason that people are coming to Vancouver is because of the access to nature. Now, it's true that a lot of Canadian cities have great parks and great environments and access to the outdoors. Vancouver is a bit of an unusual setting. There is so much greenery and life. We just talked about the weather, the amount of rain that Vancouver gets tends to make it a very full environment of life and color and green greenery for most of the year. The parks are extraordinary. The city of Vancouver is anchored by Stanley Park, but we have a network of community civic parks throughout the city. And then in the suburbs, it's the same thing. There's phenomenal parks in cities like Burnaby and Coquitlam and Port Moody. And then there's also regional parks, the Metro Vancouver parks that are within the area as well as just surrounding it, and provincial parks. And you're never very far from a park being down your street. Not to mention complete and utter wilderness and nature within about half an hour, no matter where you are in the city. It would be pretty unusual to need to drive further than a half an hour, whether it's the UBC endowment lands, the ocean, the mountains that surround Vancouver. And you can go up into the mountains from where I am in the center of the city. It takes me about half an hour to drive up there. You can even take public transit if you want. There's a bus that goes up Grouse Mountain, and within a very short walk, you're in the middle of wilderness, and you could walk further north for hours and days and weeks without running into a single soul. You could be in complete wilderness to the point where your life could actually be in danger. You could fall off a cliff, you can get lost, your GPS may not work, there could be a bear, there could be a cougar, who knows? But you really have to plan being out in the wilderness just in the surrounding areas right around Vancouver. That's how dangerous the wilderness becomes within that distance of the urban core. So those are things that people really value that are coming here and love the nature and love the access. On top of that, the result of the weather and the nature is that Vancouver has phenomenal quality of air and water. And that's another thing that draws a lot of people that have experiences in other parts of the world that are not doing as well when it comes to the environment. A lot of people really value, I've heard people talk about like just opening the doors of the airplane as they land in Vancouver and feeling the life and the moisture and the cleanliness in the air and how good the water tastes from the tap. You don't even have to buy water. If you've been watching my videos, you'll know how much I love the tap water in Vancouver. And those are big draws, nature and the environment in Vancouver. Another big reason that people are moving to Vancouver is economic opportunity. And it's true, I did say that if people are purely pursuing their career and money, they tend to move to other places, in particular Toronto or Calgary. Vancouver has that opportunity as well. There are some very good paying, huge growth sectors in the Lower Mainland. Some of them would be healthcare, education, the film industry, just to name a couple, but there tends to be a lower income in the Lower Mainland than much of the rest of Canada. We're sort of middle of the pack, and that would surprise a lot of people as the third largest city in the country, that the average income isn't higher. But I would explain it, there's a couple reasons. Number one would be that a lot of people come to Vancouver having made money elsewhere, and so they're no longer pursuing the corporate ladder. As I said, people come here for that work-life balance. And so they may have been highly paid in Toronto or in Calgary and decided to make a move to Vancouver and maybe not work as much or work as hard, or have done some things that don't require working at all. And that brings down our average income considerably. Number two would be that we do have some very big sectors in our economy that don't pay as well. And two of our 5 largest employment sectors are lower paying employment sectors. And number one would be tourism, and number two would be retail. Those are the third and fourth biggest employers in the entire region. So we have a lot of people working in those industries that are paid, maybe it's minimum wage or slightly above minimum wage. Those aren't typically jobs that family members, the primary income earner, is going to be working at. But there's many growth industries. Some of the fastest growing industries in the Lower Mainland would include information technology, healthcare, education, law, architecture, and the film industry. So there's a lot of opportunity to make very good incomes in the Lower Mainland that will earn you well above what is average. And so economic opportunity is a big reason that people are moving to the Lower Mainland. One more reason that people are moving to Vancouver is its diversity. And it is an incredibly diverse place. I think many people from other parts of Canada and the world would be surprised at the amount of diversity that exists in Vancouver, how people from so many different backgrounds and ways of thinking live together in harmony for the most part. But this is diversity both in terms of socioeconomic diversity and ethnicity and political backgrounds. And you can really find your niche, your group, your people, no matter how you feel or what you believe or where you're from, if that's what you want, you can find them here in the Lower Mainland. There's a very strong LGBTQ community in the West End, as well as on Commercial Drive. There's strong ethnic communities, recent immigrant groups from areas such as Africa or China or India. Many European countries still have very strong ethnic communities in the Lower Mainland. And then there's also a very diverse amount of socioeconomic backgrounds, from the incredibly wealthy to the lower end of the economic scale. And you can find, whether you're renting or purchasing, there are opportunities throughout the Lower Mainland. You don't have to live in the most expensive neighborhood, and you don't have to live in the poorest neighborhood. And we do have one of the poorest postal codes in all of Canada in the downtown east side, and some of the most expensive and the wealthiest postal codes in areas like West Vancouver or Cole Harbour or Point Grey, as an example. And all of those people live in this area together, and you can find that community that you want to be a part of. Whether it's the neighborhood or the suburb, they are all offering so much and offer, the right kind of community to the right type of people. And that's where my skill as a real estate agent kind of comes in here to help you understand. First, I need to understand you, but how do you fit in? What's important to you? And I can help you target the right communities, because the last thing you want to do is move to the wrong neighborhood. So I am a real estate agent. My contact information here is right here on the screen. Reach out anytime, and we can start talking about where you might fit in, what's the right community for you, and where you might want to settle when you move to Vancouver. So now we're going to talk about who's actually moving here. We understand why people are moving here now, but who are the people that are settling in Vancouver today? I see this as being 4 major groups, and this is primarily my own experiences, talking to people, seeing who's coming here, and some of the statistics that I'm seeing. Predominantly, group number 1 is families. And those people who are coming here about to have children or with young children are primarily motivated because of their jobs. They're coming here because they've been transferred here, or because they value the environment. And this is the environment that they want their children to grow up in, or perhaps they have family here and they want them to be closer to those family members. They want good family neighborhoods and they want really good schools. And that's something that we have an abundance of throughout the Lower Mainland, whether those people are deciding to settle in the city of Vancouver, where there could be an area like Point Grey or Kerrisdale. If they're in a higher income bracket, areas like Main Street or Fraser on the east side of Vancouver. And then there's suburbs that are a little more affordable, such as Coquitlam or Burnaby or South Surrey. And those would all be areas that families are finding themselves welcome in and happily settling. Group number 2 is sort of at the other extreme of the age range, and those would be retirees. And generally, I would say retirees are coming to the Lower Mainland if they're not really budget conscious. So more than likely, they've done very well over their lives. Whether they're coming from another country, more frequently, they're coming here because they have family already here. But if they're coming from other parts of Canada, it's usually because they've done really well and they want the lifestyle that Vancouver affords, but they don't quite want to be remote. So most likely they want to be close to healthcare. They want some good hospitals, and an international airport is also really important because they also want to be able to leave the country and go traveling and spend some of the money that they've worked so hard to earn. They love the urban setting. They love the accessible activities that the city offers, plus the ability to travel throughout, whether it's British Columbia, Canada, or internationally. These people are more than likely to settle in some of the more urban settings, I would say. Within Vancouver, that would be the West End, Yaletown, Olympic Village. Those would be areas that would be purchasing a condo or renting a condo, or they may be moving to some of the suburbs. And some of the suburbs that are more catering to a retired population would be New Westminster, Tawasin, or White Rock. And incidentally, Tawasin and White Rock would be 2 of those destinations where we have a lot less rain and they tend to be a little warmer. So people who are seeking that, and maybe they're finding that Vancouver Island or Victoria is a little too remote, a little too small for them. They want an easier access to the city of Vancouver. White Rock and Tawasin are spots that they're finding that they're going to settle in. Number 3 would be students and foreign students. Vancouver has excellent education institutions led by the University of British Columbia and Simon Fraser University. These are 2 of the best universities in all of Canada. So there are tens of thousands of students coming coming from throughout Canada and all around the world, coming to those institutions. But then there's also a very high quality college system throughout the Metro Vancouver area. These would include Kwantlen, Capilano College, Langara, Douglas College, BCIT, the Vancouver Film School, and Emily Carr. Those are sort of the prominent colleges that we have throughout Metro Vancouver that are drawing people here. And then finally, I would also say that we have a really huge industry of ESL schools. And there's a lot of people who may only be coming temporarily, but it is people that are moving to Vancouver and spending a lot of time here, whether it's a few months or a couple years learning English, and then perhaps pursuing higher levels of education as well. These people are most likely to be settling in the central, most urban parts of the city. So in the West End or Yaletown, the areas right around there, perhaps further out into Westminster and Surrey as well, depending on, affordability and their willingness to commute. But they can be more sensitive, of course, to prices than most of the rest of the population. Finally, it would be immigrants. And immigrants are the largest part of our growing city. 2022, I believe we had 78,000 people move to the city, and the vast majority of that population were new immigrants or people pursuing permanent residency. These people most recently are highly educated and skilled, and they're coming for some of the really high quality jobs that are being offered, as we're seeing a lot of growth in these areas, and in particular a need in healthcare and information technology. Vancouver is the third most popular destination in all of Canada for immigrants. It's only slightly behind Montreal, Montreal being a city that's about 50% larger than Metro Vancouver. We are just a few thousand people behind them in our pursuit of new immigrants to Canada. So Vancouver is incredibly popular with new immigrants. These people are highly skilled and earning very good incomes. And generally, when they're moving to Vancouver, they're looking for family neighborhoods, and depending on what their incomes are, they're going to be looking at neighborhoods like Kerrisdale or Main Street or Fraser, perhaps the West End if they're looking at a condo or renting an apartment, or they're moving to suburbs such as Coquitlam or South Surrey. Those are the neighborhoods that we're typically finding new immigrants moving to, but it really does depend on kind of their economic status, where they find they're gonna most fit in. But these are the four groups. It's families, retirees, students, and new immigrants that I'm finding are coming to Vancouver and settling in Vancouver for the long term. So there you have it. We got to the bottom of why people are still moving to Vancouver and who it is that's coming here. Now, if you want more information about Vancouver, be sure to check out this channel on the regular. I do put out videos every single week about living in and moving to Vancouver. Be sure to like and subscribe, and check out this video if you want more good vibes. It's all about why I personally love living in Vancouver. And then check out this video about some of the best neighborhoods in Vancouver that you might want to be moving to. I'll see you on next week's video. Thank you so much for watching.